పాదం ప్రపంచం దేశమాససం Namo Buddha, everyone. So we are discussing the Lamrim instructions on how to train in the middle scope, and within that we just started the discussion with on how to train in the middle scope, and we've explored what is the nature of samsara. We've seen that the nature of samsara is essentially in the form of suffering, and having seen the general and the specific kinds of suffering that characterize samsara, we've realized that there's no place in samsara which is free from suffering, and hence liberation, aspiring for liberation from samsara is actually the best spiritual goal. And we took the discussion a little forward, and right now we are exploring what are the causes that keep us bound in samsara. Specifically, we had seen there are two causes. So the two causes are afflictions and karma. And within these two, affliction is the primary cause. And we'd seen the different kinds of afflictions. So there are root afflictions, and then there are secondary afflictions. And the Abhidharma texts identify 6 root afflictions and 20 different secondary afflictions. So within the root afflictions also, there's a further categorization in terms of those afflictions which are in the nature of views and those which are non-views. So we'd briefly seen that classification, and we'd seen what are those 6 root afflictions. So we'll continue our discussion from that point on. But before we do that, let's just do a short calming meditation to just settle our minds. So just adopt a proper posture, keep your back erect, shoulders straight, arms relaxed, left palm holding the right palm, thumbs touching each other, and chin slightly tucked in, tip of the tongue resting against the upper row of teeth, and eyes either closed or half open. And we'll do a mindfulness meditation. I've already given the instructions in the previous session, so maybe this time I won't bother you with detailed instructions. You can just recollect the instructions from the previous sessions. So what we are doing is anapanasmriti, or mindfulness of breath meditation. So just bring the focus of your mind to the breath and concentrate on it. So the in-breath and the out-breath. And then do it for a few minutes, and then follow it up with setting a proper motivation for the session. So that too, we've seen the instructions for that. So just reflect on the preciousness of the human rebirth, reflect on the freedoms and the endowments that characterize our life in this lifetime, and then think about the rarity of getting these 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments. So reflect on the meditation on death, the 9-point meditation on death, and also then at the end of that reflection, just come to the conclusion that individual liberation, one should seek liberation from samsara as a spiritual goal, but then we realize that individual liberation is not a sufficient goal. So we should aspire for complete enlightenment to help other sentient beings also. And then take refuge in the 3 jewels, and offer a seven limb prayer to the three jewels. So just follow these steps and so do this meditation for a few minutes. I'll just give a cue when to start the meditation on setting the motivation, and then I'll let you know when to end it. So you can start off by meditating on your breath. Okay, now you can start your reflection on the optimum human rebirth and uh, do the cultivation of the mindfulness of death, and follow it up with taking refuge in the three jewels and offering a seven limbed prayer. So do that for take the next few minutes to go through all these steps. Okay, so we've set a good motivation for this session. So let's just do a short recitation of the Bodhicitta prayer. So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other six perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharma, Namo Sangha, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharma, Namo Sangha, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharma, Namo Sangha. Okay, so these are the things that we should be able to cover in our session today. So, uh, causes of samsara. So, what keeps us bound in samsara? So, what are the origins of samsara? And we've seen that there are two: afflictions and ignorance. And then, amongst these two, afflictions like attachment and hatred, jealousy, pride, doubt, afflicted doubt. The root is what is called ignorance. So, uh, what exactly is the nature of this ignorance? We had a brief look at it. We'll probably just have a relook at that. Um, and then as I said, we've seen the classification of afflictions into the primary and the secondary afflictions. So there are six primary or root afflictions, and there are 20. So we'll just revise what those six root afflictions are. And then the uh, crux of our discussion today would focus on, our discussion would focus on what are the stages of development of these various afflictions. We'll do a short exercise um, to kind of have a look at this. What are the stages of development of afflictions? And then what are the causes of these afflictions and what are their drawbacks? So these are the things that we should be able to cover today. So this is what we are looking at right now. How to extract, after having explored what the optimum human rebirth is, and we're looking at how to extract the essence from this optimum human rebirth. And that requires us to train in the small scope, the medium scope, and in the great scope. So, what are the different aspects of training in the medium scope is what we are exploring right now. So that deals with um, developing a aspiration for liberation, and then actually ascertaining the path that leads to liberation. So the first part, how to develop an aspiration for liberation, is what we've already explored. We develop an aspiration for liberation by understanding the nature of suffering of samsara, the general sufferings of samsara, and the specific sufferings of samsara. And ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation is what we are going to study in this session. So here we look at what are the sources of suffering, what are the origins of suffering, how we enter samsara, uh, and then actually ascertaining the nature of the path that leads to liberation. So when we speak about the sources of suffering that keeps us bound in samsara, which uh, leads to rebirth in samsara, that part has three sections: how afflictions are developed, how karma is accumulated through these afflictions, and then how one leaves one's rebirth at death and is conceived in another. So the first part is what we are looking at, how afflictions are developed. And here we have already looked at the first part, identification of the root afflictions and the secondary afflictions. So the latter three are what we should be able to cover today: the stages in the development of these afflictions, the causes of these afflictions, and the drawbacks of these afflictions. So the origins of suffering. So before I proceed, do you have any doubts or questions from the previous sessions? Anything that you would want clarification on? You can ask your questions, or you could post your questions in chat, or maybe mail it through the coordinators. So if there's anyone who wants a clarification right now, You can ask your questions now. Okay, so we'll proceed then. So, origins of suffering, as we've seen, there are two factors that uh, can be considered to be the origins of suffering. So, what are these factors? There are afflictions and karma. So, we've seen that our existence is characterized by three kinds of sufferings. Can anyone name these three kinds of sufferings? Anyone? What are the three kinds of sufferings? So, okay, there's something called the suffering of suffering, the physical and the mental suffering that we experience. For example, a headache would be an instance of suffering of suffering, the first category of suffering. The second suffering is called suffering of change. So, ordinarily, the experiences that we consider to be uh, joyful or pleasurable, uh, these are experiences which um, are in reality in the nature of suffering. That the joy or the pleasure that we associate with those kind of experiences are just the first few moments of a new form of suffering. So, for example, if you're feeling very warm uh, uh, while sitting in your room, you want uh, you're feeling extremely warm, so uh, you turn on the AC and then you uh, think that the AC is relieving you of the pain of the discomfort of being extremely warm, feeling warm. But then after a little while, the 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 cool air, the cold air from the AC starts becoming a source of discomfort for you. And after a while, you want to kind of again experience some warmth, and you put on some clothes again, extra layers of clothes. So the the first few moments you experience some sort of relief, but those are just the first few moments of a new form of discomfort. So uh, the experiences that we consider to be joyful or pleasurable, they're also in the nature of suffering. This is all because the all phenomena that we engage with, um, these are impermanent in nature. So they cannot be sources of durable happiness, lasting happiness. And then the third form of suffering is called the pervasive condition suffering, and that essentially implies that we uh, this suffering is actually the source which creates the first two forms of suffering. So it is the basis for the first two forms of suffering. An example of the third form of suffering is a physical and the mental aggregates that we have. Uh, so the reason why our aggregates, the physical aggregates and mental aggregates, are an example of this third form of suffering is because they are created through these forces of karma and affliction. Uh, Hence, they're bound to become sources of suffering in the future. So that is the third form of suffering. So wherever you're in samsara, because you are under the influence of karma and afflictions, you're always under the influence of the third form of suffering, the suffering of the all pervasive condition suffering. That becomes the basis for the first two forms of suffering then. So these are the three different kinds of suffering. Karma and afflictions, we are powerless under the influence of karma and afflictions, and karma keeps us bound in samsara, and karma creates the causes for us to be reborn in samsara. And with every rebirth, we then take on a form that becomes the basis for new forms of suffering. But karma in turn comes from afflictions, different kinds of afflictions. And there are two specific kinds of afflictions that make karma potent, or give it the potency to project a new rebirth. And these two afflictions are called craving and clinging. So these two afflictions, and how they create uh, karma and make it potent to throw us into a new rebirth, will become clear in when we discuss the 12 links of dependent origination. So karma and afflictions are the origins of suffering. Okay. So afflictions like hatred and attachment, they arise. Uh, they're also rooted in what is called ignorance. And we've seen that there's a specific kind of ignorance that leads to attachment and hatred. So, what is this specific ignorance that we're talking about? Ignorance that grasps at a self where no self exists. So, this is a point that we'll keep visiting again and again during through our discussions. So, just to give a brief explanation of what this means. So we have our physical and mental aggregates, and based on our physical and mental aggregates, we impute the notion of a self. So when it comes to a personal phenomenon, there's the physical and the mental aggregates, the mind and the physical form. So when you say that, for example, I'm tall, the referent of this I is actually the physical form. Or when you say that I'm sad, the referent of this I is actually a mind that is feeling depressed. So you're not that, the I is not the mind, the I is not the form, but the I appropriates this physical form, the I appropriates the mind that feels sad. So although the I is related to the physical and the mental aggregates, it is not the physical and the mental aggregates, but we apprehend the I to be those physical and the mental aggregates. And it is this kind of grasping of the or equating the aggregates as the self, which is at the root of all our afflictions. So we'll explore that point in a little more depth as we proceed. Okay, so the 6 root afflictions that we've seen, there are the 5 non-views and the views. So within the views, there are 5 different kinds of views that have been identified. So the non-views, the afflictions which belong to the category of the non-views, are attachment, anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt. And then on the other side, there are views, and within that category, there are 5 different kinds of views, afflicted views. So the first one is the view that equates the self with the perishable aggregates. Second one is the extreme views. Third one, holding an ethic or code of behavior as supreme. And the fourth one is the view of holding the aggregates as supreme. So we'll see what all these afflicted views actually imply. So, so the non-views, the afflictions that belong to the category of the non-views. The first one is attachment, and we've seen that attachment essentially is a mental factor that perceives a contaminated thing, an impermanent thing, a conditioned thing, a thing that is conditioned by causes and other factors, as being attractive or pleasant by way of its own entity. On its own, it is deemed to be attractive and pleasant. And because it is deemed to be attractive or pleasant, we crave for it. We crave to own it. We crave to possess it. So that is attachment, and its function is to produce suffering through rebirths, specifically because you're attached to sensual pleasures, and the basis for these sensual pleasures is our physical form and the various kinds of physical organs, the eye organ, the ear organ, the taste organ, the smell organ, and the tactile organ. Uh, it's through the medium of these organs that we experience the sensual pleasures, the pleasant sensations, and we crave for these sensations. It's that craving, that attachment, that desire that creates the energy that propels us into a new rebirth, that creates a new form. So that's the first one, attachment. Then anger is a mental factor that is in the nature of an ill will or a malice towards either sentient beings or suffering or sources of suffering. So three different factors that it could take as an object, and it generates some sort of an ill will or a malice towards either of these three. And it's just like attachment, this too is a superimposition that exaggerates the badness, the bad qualities of an object. So, what does anger do? What is its function? It drives a person towards a wish to do harm to the object of anger, and it has the potential to destroy a lot of virtue. Pride is a mental factor that leads to having an inflated opinion of oneself. And then ignorance, as we had seen, is a mental factor that leads to misknowing of the nature of the mode of being of things, or misknowing the nature of the Four Noble Truths, the law of cause and effect, the three jewels, etc. So, ignorance is a mental factor that obscures us from knowing the true mode of being of things. And what does it do? It causes us to have wrong ascertainment of phenomena. It creates doubts. The antidote to deal with ignorance is to meditate on the wisdom of selflessness. And then there is afflicted doubt, which is a mental factor that is described as being uncertain with respect to the objects, which could be either the Four Noble Truths, the three jewels, the law, cause, and effect. So this mental factor makes us uncertain about whether the noble truths, the three jewels, or the law of cause and effect exists or not, whether they are true or not. So that kind of a mental factor is called unafflicted doubt. So these are the five non-views, afflictions, which are the non-views. And then there are the afflicted views. So there are five of these. So the first one is the view that equates the self with the perishable aggregates. Then the second one is extreme views. So what are these? So let's just look at each of these individually. So the first one, the view that equates the self with the perishable aggregates. So its nature, its entity, its definition is that it's a deluded view, and it is directed towards our aggregates, of physical and the mental aggregates, and it regards these physical and the mental aggregates as being the self or belonging to the self. So there's an imputation of I and mine. Rather, it appropriates the aggregates as being mine, or it equates the aggregates with the I, with the self. Why is it called the view that equates the self with the perishable? It's because the aggregates, the physical and the mental aggregates, are actually impermanent. They are perishable. So while the notion of self that we we grasp on, that notion actually sees the self as being permanent, sees the self as being unitary, independent. In reality, if you're equating the aggregates with the self, the aggregates, the physical aggregates, and the mental aggregates, they are changeable, they are perishable. The physical form, for example, perishes at the time of death, and even on a momentary basis, every moment the physical form disintegrates and new form is generated. It abides for a moment and then disintegrates. So the aggregates on the basis which are appropriated by the self are perishable, but the self itself is seen to be non-perishable or permanent. The aggregates are multiple, but the self itself is seen to be unitary. So there's this problem with this notion of self that we have in relation to the physical and the mental aggregates. Uh, the second afflicted view is the view is what is called the extreme view. So what does this do? So extreme views are again directed towards anything grasped at by the above view, the first view, that equates itself with the perishable, and it takes uh, these things, the self or the aggregates, uh, or the notion of mind, the notion of I and mind to be permanent, stable, independent, established as being true, and so on. So that is one extreme, to see the I as being permanent, and the other extreme is to kind of think that the I gets discontinued or is annihilated uh, at the time of death. So the continuity of I is discontinued at death. So that's the other extreme. So on the one side, you deem it to be permanent. On the other side, the other extreme could be that you see it as only lasting till the continuity of this present physical form lasts. So it gets discontinued or it gets destroyed at the time of death. So these are the extreme views. Uh, the third one is a belief in the supremacy of wrong views. So, what does this afflicted view do? So this delusion is directed towards the above two views, and the wrong view is the fifth one, and the aggregates of the holder of these views. So any person who has these views in his mind stream, the aggregates of that person, and it takes these views and the aggregates to be supreme. So this is the best view that one can have, is what this afflicted view tells you. The fourth afflicted view is holding an ethic or some sort of a code of behavior as supreme. So what does this view do? So there are lots of spiritual practitioners. So uh, there are those who, or there are probably few people who believe that engaging in activities like uh, standing on one leg with your arm extended forward, practicing severe ascetic practices, uh, jumping over tridents, those kind of practices can lead to liberation. So they hold that these kind of behaviors or a specific kind of ethic can lead to liberation. So this is the fourth view, afflicted view. And then the fifth one, wrong views, it mainly comprises of views that see the four noble truths or the three jewels or the law of karma as non-existent. So that is these are examples of the fifth category of afflicted views, the wrong views. So these are the five types of the wrong views. And then the first five are afflictions which belong to the category of the non-views. So in all, there are the six root afflictions, and these then lead to the secondary or the derivative afflictions, which are listed in the Abhidharma text, and there are 20 of them. Maybe we'll look at them some other times. So, okay, the stages of development of afflictions. So, we've seen that there are the six root afflictions, and amongst these also attachment, desire, attachment, hatred, and delusion. These three are considered to be the three root poisons. And delusion, in turn, then acts as a basis for the other two, attachment and aversion, desire and aversion. So let's see what are the different stages that one can identify in the development of these kind of afflictions, um, either attachment or aversion or the other um, afflictions. So I'll just give you a short exercise. So just have a look at these images. So there's just a random compilation of some images here. What I want you to do is just have a look at these images and then pick one, pick your poison, and then close your eyes and be mindful about, you already practiced mindfulness of breath. In this case, just be mindful about the object that you picked and let your mind engage freely with the object, and just make a note of how your mind engages with these objects. So just pick a object and then close your eyes and just let your mind freely engage with these objects, and do it for about 4 5 minutes. Yeah, I'll let you know when to stop. So just close your eyes and start. Yeah. Okay, so I hope that you had some interesting insight into how your mind engage with the object of your choice. So what I want you to do is just reflect, make a note of all the the mental states that manifested in your mind uh, in the last 3-4 minutes while you let your mind engage with one of these objects. Uh, See what made your mind, why was it drawn towards, assuming that your mind was drawn towards any of these objects, why it was drawn toward that object, uh, what caused it. Ask yourself if the attraction that you felt to that object was kind of instinctive, or is it conditioned, acquired, in the sense that it's conditioned by the environment that you're part of. The environment uh, made you feel some sort of attraction towards that object. Uh, Ask yourself what kind of feelings manifested in your mind when you thought about this object. These are all mental feelings, but these mental feelings also, did they uh, invoke uh, images of some sensations, physical sensations? Um and So also ask yourself what could be the causes that led to those feelings. Uh, and then just check if those feelings uh, led to a certain mental state. Uh, and then that mental state then uh, triggered some sort of a motive force that wanted you to act in a manner that would make you possess or own uh, one of these, the object of your choice, so that you could consume it uh, and then experience pleasure out of your consumption of that object. So just ask these questions, just reflect on it. Let's see if some of the things that you experienced are mapped in um, the the process that is described here. So the afflictions start are rooted in what is called uh, ignorance, specifically the ignorance which is in the nature of a view that equates the aggregates, the perishable aggregates with the self, or the self with the perishable aggregates. So, what are the aggregates? So, there's the physical aggregate of form, and then there are the mental aggregates of feelings. Uh, then there's discrimination, which identifies the nature of the object uh, or the phenomena that you're engaging with. Then there is volition or compositional factors, and then there's the mental aggregate of consciousness. So these are the four mental aggregates, and then the physical aggregate of form. Uh, so uh, there's this view that reifies uh, this notion of self, which is equated with the perishable aggregates. So this reifying view that observes the uh, appropriated aggregates and perceives an I or a mine that is the self, or that belongs to the self, is the root of all afflictions, whether it is attachment or aversion or pride or jealousy, greed, anger, belligerence, resentment, whatever it is. These are all rooted in this notion of self, the grasping at a self, and the grasping of the self, as we see here, the self is equated with the perishable aggregates. So for example, if there is an injury to the arm and it hurts, you say, I am in pain. So although it's the arm that is that is experiencing the pain or it's hurt, you say that I'm hurt or I'm in pain. So the referent of the I here is the arm, the physical arm. If the physical aggregate is tall, you say I'm tall. So it's the physical form that is tall, not I, but somehow we habituated ourselves to equating ourselves with the physical form. So a more accurate way of describing this is would be I have a body which is tall, or I have a mind in my mental continuum which is feeling depressed. But instead we say I'm depressed or I'm tall. So anyway, this is just a very gross kind of presentation of this concept of self. That so this view that equates the self with the perishable aggregates is the root of all afflictions. So based on this notion of self, then because you have a notion of self, you have the notion of the other. So there's discrimination that arises between self and other. And attached to that, so because you have this notion of self and other, you're attached to that which is associated with one's own pleasure, one's own profit, one's own uh, reputation, and one's own benefit, uh, and you're hostile towards the other, everything that pertains to the others. And based on this notion of self, you develop pride and the other afflictions. You develop the other afflicted views also. Um, so the view of equating the self with the perishable aggregates is the root of all afflictions. And when it comes to the self, uh, again, this notion of self, there are two kinds of these views. There is one which is acquired intellectually, maybe through your engagement with other systems of tenets, maybe through your engagement with other philosophies, or through your reading of other texts. But um, there's another category of this view, which is instinctive. It does not rely on any kind of engagement with other system of tenets of philosophy. It's not acquired, it's natural, it's innate to your nature. uh, and it's also innate in the sense that it's not only human beings that have this view, but even animals would have this view. uh, so that's the instinctive or the innate view of self. So the view of equating the self with the perishable, which is the root of all afflictions, is the instinctive view. And within the instinctive view, there are two views: the grasping at I and the grasping at mine. And the root is the grasping at I. So this I and me, this notion of I and me, is very natural to us. It's very vivid and very deep seated within our minds. And we think that this I has some sort of a independent existence. And this I is then the agent of all the actions. It's the experiencer of all experiences that it has. So it's the it assumes this character, this identity, and because of this notion, you cling to the concept of I, you grow attached to it, and because of this notion of I, then you also have notion of non-I, and because of this differentiation that you start making, then you automatically start becoming more welcoming of people who are close to you, who help you, and those who tend to harm you, you develop aversion and hatred towards. So this is how the concept or the notion of I uh, is at the root of all our afflictions. So just to illustrate this through an example, um, so let's take an object that we are attracted towards. as an example to start with. Whether it's an object that we find attractive, pleasing, pleasant, or whether it is an object that is unpleasant, all kinds of phenomena, both personal and impersonal, uh, these we identify these to have some sort of a true identity or a true self. And in the case of the person, you know, we don't see the person or the notion of I to be some sort of a dependent entity, dependent on the physical and the mental aggregates. We equate it uh, with the with the mental and the physical aggregates, and we also have this notion of self or an inherent kind of identity existing in other impersonal, non-personal phenomena also. So that is at the root of all our engagement with all kinds of phenomena. So we apprehend an existence which is independent of causes and conditions, apprehend an inherent existence which is independent of the perception which perceives that object. Uh, so it has we look at all objects as having these kind of this kind of an independent existence, independent of causes and conditions, and also independent of a subject or a perceiver that perceives that object. Oh, sorry. Okay. uh, so this notion of an inherent existence is at the root of all our engagements with all phenomena. So when it comes to an attractive, pleasant object that we engage with, so how does this ignorance, uh, operate in our engagement with pleasant objects? So as you see in this figure, there's this ignorance which grasps at a true existence of phenomena. So in this case, there's a pleasant food object of taste. Uh, so we have this notion that this object of taste exists uh, inherently, independent of its causes and conditions, inherently because it is independent of a perceiver that is perceiving or experiencing this object. So we attribute this kind of an inherent existence to this object of taste. And that leads to a misconception in relation to this object. So this misconception is in the nature of an exaggeration of the we're dealing with an object that we deem to be attractive. So this attractiveness that we attribute to the object could be because of our prior experiences, or it could also be because the environment has conditioned us to think about it as being uh, attractive. So in the slide where I put up several images, there are certain images which you know we deem them to be attractive only because the environment is telling us that these are attractive, valuable objects. For example, there was a figure of a diamond there. A diamond, uh, you know, for a large percentage of the population on this planet would consider it to be valuable. But there are certain people who, if you hand over a diamond to them, they would ask you how many uh, goats or how many plantain can this buy. And they don't associate any kind of value with that object. I mean, for them, it's just a just a good looking stone with the symmetry and radiance and all that. But beyond that, it doesn't seem to have any kind of value to it. So the value that we attach, or the pleasantness that we attach to it, the attractiveness that we attach to an object like that, is actually because we are conditioned by the environment that we are part of. The environment tells us that this is valuable. Uh, so in a sense, the desire that we have for these kind of attractive objects is in the nature of a mimetic desire. We are trying to mime uh, other people, other successful people in our environment. So so with these kind of attractive objects, we what we do is that we superimpose an attractiveness on that object. And we not only that, we exaggerate the attractiveness of that object, and we deem that attractiveness to abide in that object inherently from its own side, not because the perceiver is seeing that attractiveness in the object. We think that that object is inherently attractive. So because of this misconception, then uh, there's a uh, there's an incompatible, inconsonant mental engagement that we have with that object. So here in this example, we have an object of taste. So here, with the object of taste, our mental engagement will lead to us, registering an exaggerated degree of attractiveness in that object, and also deeming that attractiveness to be established inherently in the object from its own side. So this is from the object side. Now, what's happening from the subject side? So from the subject side also, we have this ignorance, driving our engagement with the object. So ignorance, in the sense that we deem ourselves to be inherently existent. The notion of self that we have, we think about uh, 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 our identity to be inherently established. So uh, we deem that we have a certain personality which is inherently established, and our personality, a part of our personality is actually referenced against our attraction towards these kind of pleasant objects. So we have this notion of inherent identity, and because of so that's there at the root. And then we, when we engage with the object, we say there's this inherently existent I finds this inherently existing object to be inherently attractive. So I find this object very attractive. And because of this attraction that you feel towards the object, which draws you into the object, towards the object, uh, then you also generate a wish or a desire to indulge, uh, mm, or you start hankering for the pleasures that you would experience, the pleasant sensations that you would experience when you consume this attractive object. So you build a strong desire for that object. So the inherently existent I starts desiring this very inherently attractive, inherently existent object. So that is the mental state that manifests in your mind stream. Now, because of this desire, what happens is that on the one hand, it triggers follow-up afflictions, like uh, there's this very intense kind of craving that you manifest for that object. You want to kind of be you want to own it, you want to possess it, and then because of this intense craving, you start grasping at it. So you want to make it your own. So these afflictions are then triggered, and then based on these afflictions, craving and grasping, you set a motive force into motion, and that leads to karma being affected, uh, karma being actualized, and the karma could be either wholesome or unwholesome. And based on that, you would create some sort of a potential karma for a rebirth in the future. So that's happening on one side, and on the other side, when you generate this intense desire for that object, it reinforces uh, the desire, the attraction that you feel towards these kind of pleasant objects. So it reinforces the affliction of attachment. And how does it do? It reinforces the afflictions through the medium of seeds and imprints that are planted on your mind stream. So this is how this process operates, this process that gives rise to attachment, desire, operates. So, so just think about the exercise that you did, and see, you know, what part of this process you can isolate and identify when you recollect your mental engagement with the object of your choice from this collage of images that I put up on the slide. So just go back and just see if you can identify any of these, whether any of these stages are manifested in your mental engagement with the object. Okay, so we've run out of time. We'll pause here. The rest of the discussion will continue in our next session. So we'll just end with a short dedication. So just relax and recollect the discussion that we've had, and just think about the, the, the origins of suffering, afflictions, and ignorance, and think about the different kinds of afflictions that have been identified in the text. Just recollect that afflictions are belong to two categories: the root afflictions and the secondary afflictions. And the root afflictions are categorized in two categories: the non-views and the views. And then just recollect from the example that we discussed, the different stages of development of the affliction of attachment. So today we saw just the stages in the development of the affliction of attachment. Maybe in the next session we'll look at how aversion or anger manifests, and the different stages in the development of anger and aversion. So think about all this, and also just reflect on the exercise that you've done. So through our participation in this discussion, we accumulate some merit. So let's just direct that merit to a virtuous cause. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a completely enlightened Guru Buddha and lead all sentient beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel Bodhicitta that does not arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Okay, thank you for your time and patience, and see you in the next session. Okay. There are a couple of questions. Maybe I'll take up these questions in our next session. Virginia Lopez has a question, and then there's a question from Ashley Stewart. So we'll discuss these questions in the next session. We've run out of time today. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to mail your questions to me. I'll take up those questions in the next session. Okay. Thank you. See you in the next session then. Let me just copy these. Just give me a moment. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Let me go ahead and I also took a picture, by the way, of the questions that y'all had, and I'll go ahead and make sure that I email these. Let's go ahead and do the Heart Sutra. After that, I just have a very quick announcement. And let me share. The Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, Arya Bhagavati Pranamita Hridaya Sutra. Refuge. I take refuge in the Guru, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. in the Supreme Assembly, I'm sorry. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Mass of Vultures Mountain on Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Aryavalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to Bodhisattva Mahasattva Aryavalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Aryavalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon. Oh, sorry about that. We'll make sure to fix that. Should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, and up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, and up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to an unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tadyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. 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 Tadyata Om Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhiswaha. Tadyata Om Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhiswaha. Tadyata Om Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhiswaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. The Bhagavan arose from the concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Aryavalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, Asuras, Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. And this completes the Arya Bhagavati Pranaparamita Hridaya Sutra. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Let me stop sharing.